Hey everyone, this is Dr. Drizzle, and welcome to the National Parks Expedition Challenge. Today we're in Big Cypress National Preserve here in southern Florida, and I am in the water here with my new friend and rock star ranger, Ranger Lisa. Ranger Lisa, thank you for inviting us into your area here.
Thank you for coming to visit it. I love to have friends come and walk in the swamp with me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, a couple of things. Since I spent so much time here as a kid in Naples, my mom was just infatuated with the outdoors, and she took us to every state park in our area. We didn't have national parks in where I was from in southern Indiana, except one small historical park, which I eventually ended up working at. That was the first national park I worked at. But we would come to Florida, we would spend a lot of time on the beach, and if the beach was kind of crummy that day, she'd take us out here to the swamp, and we'd look for orchids, and we'd look at the birds, and we'd fish along the Tamiami Trail, and we'd wade through the swamp. So it kind of stuck, I guess, because now that's what I do. I take people and kids out to the swamp. So I went to college, went to Indiana University. I wanted to go into marine biology and come to University of Florida, but they changed that to a master's degree. So I stayed back in Indiana, was getting a degree in biology, and then I found environmental education through the recreation school. And I thought, this is really what I want to do. So I changed into that, got a degree in environmental ed and interpretation is what it boiled down to. And I did an internship here in South Florida at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. And when I got through school, I did some other things for a few years. I didn't get right into this field. And when I finally did, my first park was George Rogers Clark National Historical Park in southern Indiana. And that was right across the street from where I grew up in Indiana. And I wanted to come work in Big Cypress. I guess I always wanted to either work in a swamp or a jungle. I really thought I was going to grow up and marry Johnny Weissmuller, but I didn't understand that he was going to be older and die eventually. But yeah, I always wanted to work in the swamp, and Big Cypress was what I was familiar with.
So how long have you been here?
27 years.
27 years.
Yeah.
Which is unusual in some of our findings, because we find a lot of kids in the park are park hoppers. Like they'll move to different places.
Exactly.
But we've also found that there are some diehard park rangers that found their home.
That's
and
exactly
they do
right.
Not leave there.
I found my park. This is where I always want to be. I've worked at 5 other national parks, and I love this place. And people do ask me, why did you never go out west and work at one of the big parks like Yellowstone or the Grand Canyon? Why? I mean, to me, this is the most beautiful place in the world, and there's so much to offer here. We don't have bison that walk up and snort in your window, and we don't have geysers that spew or a huge canyon, but we've got the most beautiful, subtle things here that if you get into it like we're doing today and get wet and get up close and personal, it's just as big of a wow, even though it might be just a small, subtle beauty. I'm in love with this place.
Well, you sold us.
I don't think that there's any place any more beautiful than this.
So I know you call this the Cypress Swamp. So tell us a little bit about these trees.
Well, here we are standing among these towering cypress trees that are probably 60, 70 feet tall. One of the most interesting things about them at this time of the year, the leaves are all turning brown and falling off because they're deciduous trees. They lose their needles in the winter. If you'd come back out here, say July, August, it would have been this dense, dark green canopy. And if you come back out in maybe April or May, it's going to be that light spring green with all the new growth on the cypress. One thing I like about them also is this rough bark. Look at this rough bark. Ferns, moss, all kinds of epiphytes can grow on these, including the air plants. And if you look at that, does it look like something that you like to eat? They're related to the pineapples. Does it look like a pineapple top to you?
It does.
Right. And so that's a bromeliad, or we call them air plants. They just kind of hang out on this tree. So in a variety of ferns, here's another one called the shoestring fern. Lichens all over that tree. So these trees get a lot of hitchhikers on them. They're beautiful trees, and they have these big, wide bases. It's kind of a funny word. We call it a buttress.
Okay.
So these big, wide buttresses help to support that tree and make it nice and sturdy for if we get hurricanes or other high wind events. And also, if you're standing in water and loose soil, you're going to want to make sure that you've got extra support in your roots. So we have these things over here called the Cypress Knees. And these are little projections that come up from the roots and also are an adaptation to kind of structurally support that tree.
So they're part of the tree.
They are. They're part. They don't make a tree. They're just part of the root system.
Very nice.
Pretty incredible, huh?
I notice up ahead we have some students here. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, those are our students from our Collier County Public Schools. We also get private schools out here as well. But we see every single 6th grader from the Collier County Public Schools. They turn into scientists for the day, and they are hydrologists, meteorologists, soil scientists, botanists, and wildlife biologists while they're out here. And they do a lot of experiments collecting important data on this place. They use the same kind of equipment as our own researchers here in the preserve use, and do all kinds of fun experiments studying the hydrosphere and the atmosphere and the geosphere while they're here.
Well, let's take a look at some of their experiments.
Yeah, let's do.
So this is tied to their 6th grade standard. So what exactly is that standard?
The nature of science is
Okay.
the big picture.
Yeah.
So we study soil, water, weather in depth pretty well. Human impacts is part of that. And then we throw in animals and vegetation as well.
Okay.
Because
why not?
you can't
Right.
talk about this place without connecting everything. We also have a lot on fire. When we get out to the pine lands where it's really evident, we talk about fire.
So you have prescribed things out here.
I do. We have one of the largest really, prescribed fire program in the Park Service.
So I see they've got their clipboard. So they're going to make some comparisons to
Yeah,
what they've seen before.
yeah, they have their scientist data workbook, so they're collecting data. All the experiments they're doing, they're writing down their findings, and they can use that back in the classroom in activities. Our water's pretty pristine. It's in really good shape compared to the eastern side of the state.
Right.
We don't have as much agriculture above. We haven't been altered as much for hundreds of miles of roads and canal systems like they have on the east side. So our water's in really good shape. And then as it flows through Big Cypress, through this big wetland, it's like a big coffee filter.
Right.
And
So
it
it's
just
getting
cleanses it. So by the time it gets to the estuary below, it's in really good shape, and enough of it is reaching the estuary that is critical for all those little marine species. The rest of the water that's not flowing across the land is percolating down into the aquifer below, and that becomes our drinking water here. So they need to be aware of it and concerned about it for the future. Here in the preserve, Everglades City, Marco Island, Immokalee, and Naples, we all get our drinking water from the aquifer below here.
I'm looking at a group of very diverse kids with big smiles on their faces, knee deep, waist deep in the water, learning and having the most amazing time. I'm very impressed that Big Cypress offers this opportunity for kids.
So, in Big Cypress we have Florida Panthers.
Yes.
And we have cameras out in the field monitoring places that we know are areas that panthers use a lot. But one thing that we do here in our program to learn more about the Florida panther is we actually track a Florida panther. We use the same equipment, the radio telemetry equipment that our biologists would use on a collared cat. And we start back there. We know that there's a cat in this area wearing a collar, and so we start tracking it, and the kids are little biologists, and we get over to this area, and I'll show you what we find. Don't laugh.
Nice.
This is our Florida panther. Now, this little transmitter is real. It's used on small mammals or maybe even large birds like the Everglades snail kite. If our scientists want to study an animal like that, they can put this size on. But babies, kittens, which would be a little bigger than this, don't get collared. They get a little microchip like you might put on a dog or a cat, just underneath the skin between the shoulder blades. And then they can scan it with this little handheld device. It's kind of like when you go to the grocery store and they scan your food and the price pops up. Well, we can scan this little guy and a number pops up that coincides with the location of the den, who its mother was, all kinds of important information and data that they can use later if they find that cat again.
So tell me a little bit about what we would find in these types of swamps that you're working in.
We do have alligators that live here. This is their home. They don't want to be bothered. Alligators are not hungry all the time. They don't want us as their food. Just like any wild animal, they have a natural fear of people. So if they were here, they would be hiding. They would be down under the water, maybe out in the canal where it's deeper and they feel safe.
Right.
Or they'd be holding still, acting like a log, and hoping
we
that we
wouldn't.
think they're a log. Where they become dangerous, and so many people are scared of them, is in areas where people frequent. They fish there, or they throw food to them to get a better picture. So that's where we have troubles with alligators, because they don't realize that your white tennis shoe isn't part of the sandwich the last guy threw them. But out here in these natural areas where they haven't been fed, they are very much afraid of us. Did you mention snakes? Snakes are something that's found here too.
Okay.
And we have 4 venomous snakes and then about 40 non-venomous snakes that live in this
I like
area.
that she's telling us this as we walk deeper into the cypress, because there's no way to escape here. So what are those 4 venomous?
The eastern diamondback, the little bitty rattlesnake, which is the pygmy rattlesnake, and then we have the cottonmouth or water moccasin. That's the same snake, but a lot of people call it the 2 separate names, thinking they're 2 separate snakes.
Okay.
And the coral snake. And we very rarely see any of them. As you can imagine, with 45 kids and a big yellow bus pulling up and stomping around out here every day, we very rarely see snakes, and we just hardly ever see the alligators.
Okay.
But they might be seeing us right now.
They could be looking. We come in peace.
We have 2 different kinds of squirrels here. We have the gray squirrels that most people are used to, and then we have a fox squirrel called the Big Cypress Fox Squirrel, and they are huge, and they have the biggest fluffy tails, and they come in different colors. There might be a brownish orangish one with an ivory colored belly. There might be the brownish orange with a bright orange belly. There are all black ones, and they have a little white tip on their nose and their tail. And then there are black ones that have an orange belly, so they look like a Halloween squirrel.
Nice.
And they're huge, and they jump from tree to tree to tree. When I was little, we called them, what do we call them? Squirrel monkeys, monkey squirrels, or something like that, because they just fly from tree to tree like monkeys. But I am partial to the Cypress Swamp. Now we're going uphill into the prairie, those big open grasslands.
Well, tell us about this ecosystem that
Well,
we're in.
let me tell you about this stuff right here. Looks kind of gooey and nasty. Here. How does that feel? They might have
Like
told you about this over at Everglades, or you
wet
might have seen our
cotton balls.
YouTube video. It's kind of like soggy Cheetos.
Oh, okay. Now I'm never going to get that out of my head. That'll stop me from
It's
eating
called
Cheetos.
Periphyton.
Periphyton.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And periphyton is a whole mix of things. It's a mix of blue-green algae, and you can see that blue-green color in there.
But there's also worms and insects in here too.
There's little organisms in there. There might even be eggs. So algae, it's plant and animal life in there. And usually it grows right around these stems of the vegetation. So if you open it up, you'll see, look, there's a stem in there of a plant. And it's grown around that just like a little sweater.
Yep, I've got one too.
And look how it holds water. It's just like a sponge. Doesn't it feel kind of spongy?
Mm-hmm.
And watch when we squeeze it, how much water it holds. So when this dries down out here in the prairie for about half of the year, if you're a little critter that absolutely depends for your survival on moisture, you're going to hope that this stays nice and moist and holds a little water so you can burrow into there, or your food source does, and you can survive into the dry season. Even just a morning dew, you know, when you go out in the morning and you've got dew on your car that you have to wipe off, that dew is enough to keep this moist. And then this kind of just decomposes and disintegrates and turns into this sticky clay-like soil that we have here in the prairie. It's very nutrient poor, it sticks to your shoes, and it's called marl, and this is what makes it. It's also a good food source for a lot of things like our apple snails and other little aquatic creatures.
So what could we find out here?
Well, the prairie is mostly just all these grasses and sedges and wildflowers because that nutrient poor soil, the marl, and also they're thin soils, they're not very deep. So when the students were checking the depth of the soil, their sticks didn't go down very deep. So if you're a tree that needs a big root base and you want to be high and dry, where this is wet half the year, you're not going to grow here very well. So just grasses and sedges. So since we don't have big vegetation or big trees like over in the cypress, there's not a lot of cover for wildlife, but there is for small things. During the wet season, all kinds of little fish and crawdads and other aquatic creatures can live in among these grasses in the water, but not when it dries down. But then snakes and rabbits and other things can find refuge in the grasses.
We heard birds when we first came in. What are your favorites?
I love the wading birds, like our egrets and herons, especially the roseate spoonbill. They're bigger, they stand still, they're more tolerant of people. So you can watch them and watch their feeding behaviors, which I find fascinating. The little birds I love too, but it kind of hurts my neck looking up at them all the time, and our trees are so tall, they're so much harder to identify. So I try to identify them by sound.
Which you did when we were first here. You were talking about the different types of woodpeckers.
That's right.
That we heard.
One thing, this grass will burn if they burn through here when it's drier, but you would be amazed at the green growth that comes back in just a few days after a fire. These grasses just start sprouting, and that provides food and cover for all kinds of wildlife, especially deer that will come through these prairies to feed on the new grasses. Deer also love this plant, and this one was probably bitten off by a deer. Deer love to feed on the swamp lily. Another deer trail there.
So they don't mind going through this water?
So pretty much everything out here has no choice but to go through water, even our Florida panthers, and you know cats don't really like water. Last year when we didn't have kids out here, when we had to go virtual, in the Cypress Swamp we set up a game cam to see who was using the trails when there were no children. And sure enough, 7 different panthers were using this area, and one of them came up onto the plug up there, right out of the water, and you could see she was all wet. But she has no choice. To wander around in a swamp, you've got to put up with the water.
So where are we now? We've done the Cypress Swamp.
Right.
We have done the prairie. And now we are in...
Well, did you feel that you were coming uphill just a little bit?
I did. I felt the breath.
We came uphill into the pine lands. And if you look around, we're surrounded by these huge slash pines. And then in the understory, we've got cabbage palms and saw palmettos. So completely different look from the prairie that just had all those grasses or those big cypress trees and water over in the Cypress Swamp.
You know, you've told me about 3,000 plus kids that come through here every year for 21 years, I believe you said. So I can imagine that the trails get a lot of use.
That's right. The impact to the resource on these trails is very apparent. If you're looking back through the trails, you can see that the soil has been displaced. The limestone bedrock is sticking up through the soil here, and the vegetation is all worn away. So that is a big impact on this area.
Well, we like to encourage our students to solve a problem at each of the national parks. You know what? We always talk about our kids being the future, but I say that they're the present. They're the ones that need to solve problems now, and we tie those to United Nations global goals. So kids, I have a good one for you. We're going to tie this to goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, and also a little bit to goal 13, climate change, human impact. We need you to come up with a plan to reinforce these trails so that more students can come out, because if this school district grows, the numbers are going to go up. And we want your children's children to be able to use this amazing place, this Big Cypress National Preserve. So a couple things. First, do some research. Check out the resources that Big Cypress has. Check out some resources that we're including right here. And then we want you to come up with a plan from beginning to end of what you could do to shore up this path, whether it's bringing in new materials, whether it's filling in the holes. What can you do that will cause a long-time impact for this area, for kids now and for kids in the future? And I am sure Ranger Lisa would be your new best friend.
It would be fantastic.
Yeah, we know that kids have amazing problem-solving skills.
They do.
And they probably already have ideas. So you can build a prototype for some type of fencing or some type of understory piece that you can build. I don't even know. I haven't done the research yet. I'm going to depend on you guys. So you can tag us at Dacia 92 and also Big Cypress National Preserve, and we're going to share all the ideas with Ranger Lisa.
Oh, that would be great. I can't wait to see what they come up with.
Well, thanks so much for doing that. So Lisa, the students that watch this, sometimes over 1 million kids, you're going to be YouTube viral by that way, just letting you know that. They're interested in your job. Like, they want to wear the uniform. And some of these kids are as young as kindergartners. What advice could you give them if they were interested in a career in the national parks? You can look right at the camera and tell them.
Well, I think just having that interest in the outdoors and how we can keep this around for future generations, how our kids and grandkids can learn about the wildlife here, the plant life, everything that's out here in a natural area like this, and how we can conserve that. So get interested in that. See what you can do in your backyard, in your local area, in public lands and wildland areas. Maybe you volunteer. Maybe you get interested in science and do some science projects. Take science-based classes throughout your education. Even when you go to college, take the type of classes that would relate to this. But volunteering, I think, is a really nice way to do it. And I'm sure there's several places in your communities that you can volunteer. And when you get old enough to be a volunteer in a national park unit, try to do that. Do an internship. Come to a place like Big Cypress and work in the outdoor environment or work with children, learning about conservation efforts for the future.
Great ideas, great opportunities for you to learn now so you can work for Lisa later on and then sort of take over some of the jobs that the Rangers will be leaving. They'll be retiring and they'll want someone to take their jobs. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. First time ever that we have filmed when my feet and my knees were covered in water, which has been truly a treat. And nothing has gotten me, which I was a little concerned about that. So thanks for protecting me out here. We're so excited that you joined us today for the National Parks Expedition Challenge. This is Ranger Lisa, Dr. Drizzle, and we're out of here.
Bye-bye.